always believed my life was perfect. I had a caring husband, Mark, and a steady job at one of the most well-known corporate offices in New York. Mark and I had been married for 8 years, and while our love wasn't as passionate as it used to be, I thought we had something strong, something genuine. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself every night before I went to sleep. Everything changed on a rainy Thursday evening. The office was almost empty, with most of my coworkers already gone for the day. I had stayed behind to finish a project that was due the next morning. The quiet hum of the air conditioner and the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the room. I decided to leave the finished files on Ethan's desk. He was my boss. Ethan was the kind of man who caught attention easily. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a sharply defined jawline. He carried himself with a confidence that was both commanding and attractive. But I always kept a respectful distance. After all, I was a married woman, and Ethan was my superior. As I walked toward his office, I noticed the door was slightly open. I knocked gently but didn't hear an answer. Assuming he had already gone home, I pushed the door open and froze. Ethan was standing there with his back to me, a towel loosely wrapped around his waist. Droplets of water shimmered on his tanned, muscular back. His wet hair was a bit messy. He had clearly just come out of the private shower attached to his office. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I stuttered, quickly turning around, my face flushed with embarrassment. "Emma!" His deep voice stopped me in my tracks. "It's okay. I didn't hear you knock." I turned back, unable to stop myself from glancing at him. He was now putting on a shirt, the fabric clinging to his damp chest, outlining every detail of his body. I tried to look away, but my eyes refused to obey. For a moment our eyes met. His expression wasn't angry or surprised. It was intense, almost magnetic. It was the kind of look that makes you forget where you are and even who you are. My heart pounded, and I could feel my palms becoming sweaty. I just came to drop these off," I managed to say, holding out the folder. He gave me a slow, knowing smile that made my stomach flutter. "Thanks, Emma. I'll check them later." I nodded and quickly rushed out of his office, the sound of my heels echoing against the polished floor. By the time I got back to my desk, my heart was still racing. What just happened? Why did I feel like this? That night, I couldn't get Ethan out of my head. The way his eyes held mine, the way his presence made my skin tingle. It was risky, but it was also exciting, something I hadn't felt in years. I told myself it was nothing, just an innocent moment that I had overthought. But deep down I knew better. Something had changed and there was no turning back. If you're already drawn in, don't forget to stay tuned for more powerful stories like this. Believe me, this is just the beginning. I tried to erase that memory from my mind. I convinced myself it didn't mean anything, that it was only a passing feeling, something harmless. But the truth was, Ethan was everywhere, in my thoughts, in my dreams, and most dangerously in my daily life at work. The next morning, I walked into the office feeling uneasy. I avoided Ethan's eyes during our morning team meeting, pretending to take notes while focusing on my notepad. But even as I tried to ignore him, I could feel his presence, the weight of his gaze quietly resting on me. Later that day he stopped by my desk. "Emma," he said casually, leaning against the side of my cubicle. His voice was low enough that only I could hear. I could hear him say, "Do you have a minute?" I nodded, trying to stay calm, but my hands shook slightly as I followed him into his office. He closed the door behind us and motioned toward the chair across from his desk. "Have a seat." I sat at the edge of the chair, gripping my pen like it was a lifeline. Ethan walked to his side of the desk, but instead of sitting, he leaned against it, arms folded, eyes fixed on mine. "About last night," he began. My heart jumped into my throat. "I'm so sorry," I said quickly. "I didn't mean to walk in like that." He raised a hand to stop me. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said gently but firmly. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." His concern caught me by surprise. "I'm fine," I replied quickly, though my voice shook. He gave me that slow, calming smile that had been haunting me since the night before. Good. I wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable around me. The way he said it, his tone so careful, so filled with unspoken meaning, sent a chill down my spine. Over the next few weeks, our conversations became more frequent and more intense. He'd linger by my desk during lunch breaks, casually asking about my weekend plans. He'd find reasons to call me into his office for quick chats that always lasted longer than they needed to. It was during one of those conversations that everything changed. We had both stayed late to finish a project. The office was quiet, the soft humming of computers the only sound around us. I was sitting across from him, going over the final details of a report, when he suddenly reached across the desk and placed his hand over mine. "Emma," he said, his voice low and filled with something I couldn't quite name. I looked up, my breath catching in my throat. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, the air between us felt charged. "I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed. His words sent a wave of excitement through me, something I couldn't deny. I knew I should have pulled my hand away. I should have reminded him that I was married, that this was wrong. But instead I leaned in, closing the space between us. Our first kiss was soft, almost hesitant, but it quickly deepened, becoming urgent and overwhelming. That night marked the start of our affair. We became skilled at hiding it. Quick glances in the office, whispered calls late at night, secret meetups in his car. Every touch, every kiss, every quiet word felt like a rush, a risky thrill I couldn't resist. But as exciting as it was, a part of me always felt ashamed. Mark didn't deserve this. He was a good man. And I hated lying to him. Still, every time I tried to break things off with Ethan, he'd draw me back in, with a look, a touch, a single word. The breaking point came one evening in Ethan's office. I was sitting on his desk, legs dangling over the edge, while he stood between them, his hands resting on my hips. We were so lost in the moment that we didn't hear the footsteps approaching the door. A knock startled us, and we quickly stepped apart, our hearts racing. Ethan opened the door to find one of our co-workers standing there. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at us. She didn't say a word, but the look on her face said everything. She knew. And for the first time since this began, I truly felt the weight of what we were doing, the risk we were taking. "Are you on the edge of your seat yet? If you want to know what happens next, don't forget to stay tuned for more emotional and powerful stories." I couldn't shake the expression on my coworker's face that evening. The way her eyes flicked between me and Ethan, the faint smirk on her lips as she walked away. It sent a chill down my spine. She knew. There was no doubt about it. For the next few days, I lived in a constant state of anxiety. Every time she looked my way, it felt like the walls were closing in. She hadn't said anything, but her silence was louder than words. At home, things weren't much better. Mark had started noticing how distant I'd become. He wasn't the kind of man to press me for answers, but the tension between us was growing. "Working late again?" he asked one evening as I walked through the door. "Yeah, the team's been swamped," I replied, avoiding his eyes. Mark didn't push the matter, but I could see the suspicion growing in his expression. He wasn't naive. One evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, I felt him standing behind me. He leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Who are you texting?" he asked casually, but there was a sharpness in his voice. "Just a coworker," I answered quickly, locking my screen. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, his tone still relaxed but his eyes intense. My heart started pounding. I had been careless earlier, and there was still a message from Ethan sitting in my inbox. I gave a nervous laugh. "It's just work stuff, Mark. You wouldn't be interested." He didn't press further, but the doubt in his eyes was growing. At work, Ethan tried to calm my nerves. "She won't say anything," he said confidently, referring to our coworker. "She has no proof." But his confidence didn't ease my anxiety. I started noticing the way people looked at us, the way conversations would stop when I entered the break room, the whispers that followed me down the hallway. Then the inevitable happened. One night, Mark came home early from his shift. I was in the shower when I heard the familiar ping of my phone. I didn't think anything of it until I stepped out and saw Mark sitting on the edge of the bed, my phone in his hand. "Who is Ethan?" he asked, his voice low and controlled, but his knuckles were white from gripping the phone. Panic surged through me. "Mark, I can explain." He stood up, cutting me off. "Explain what, Emma? That you've been sneaking around with your boss? That you've been lying to me for who knows how long?" Tears welled up in my eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Mark let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You didn't mean for it to go this far? What does that even mean? You didn't accidentally kiss him, Emma. You didn't accidentally have an affair." I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Mark, please. Love you. This was a mistake. I swear." He raised a hand to stop me. "Don't. Just don't." The pain in his eyes was unbearable. He grabbed his keys and walked out, slamming the door behind him. That night was the longest of my life. I sat on the couch, replaying everything, trying to figure out when it had all started to fall apart. I wanted to blame Ethan, to say he had tempted me, but deep down I knew the truth. It had been my decision. The next morning I went to work feeling completely numb. Ethan tried to speak to me, but I brushed him off. "It's over," I said, my voice cold and distant. He looked hurt, but I didn't care. I had already lost too much. When Mark finally returned home, he didn't say a word. He grabbed a few things and left again. I didn't try to stop him. What could I possibly say to fix any of it? The house felt emptier than ever without him. Every creak in the floorboards, every tick of the clock reminded me of the emptiness I had caused. I tried calling him, texting him, but he either ignored me completely or responded with short, emotionless messages. At work, things weren't any better. Ethan behaved like nothing had happened, but the atmosphere had changed. What once felt exciting was now overshadowed by guilt and discomfort. And then came the whispers. The quiet, cutting comments from coworkers that followed me wherever I went. The colleague who had caught us that night hadn't kept it to herself. Soon the entire office was buzzing with rumors about me and Ethan. Every time. Whenever I walked into a room, the chatter would suddenly stop, replaced by judgmental stares. Ethan tried to ease the tension. "People will move on," he said during one of our rare conversations. "This will blow over." But it didn't. A week later, Mark finally agreed to meet me. He chose a small cafe far from home, and when I arrived, he was already there, staring into his coffee. "Mark," I began, my voice shaking. He looked up, his face unreadable. "Why, Emma?" he asked. "Was I not enough for you?" Tears filled my eyes. "You were enough. You've always been enough. This wasn't about you." "Then what was it about?" he demanded, his voice rising. "What could possibly justify throwing away everything we built?" I reached for his hand, but he pulled it back. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I was selfish. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to stop." Mark shook his head, his jaw clenched. "Didn't know how to stop? How about not starting in the first place?" His words hit me like a slap, and I couldn't stop the sobs that shook my body. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." He sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Emma. Trust doesn't just come back overnight." "I'll do whatever it takes," I begged. "I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. Just tell me what I can do." He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "I need time and space. This isn't something I can decide right now." The days that followed were torture. I focused on fixing what I could. I resigned from my job, cutting off all contact with Ethan. It wasn't easy. He tried to convince me to stay, promising things would get better, but I knew I had to walk away. At home, I packed away the reminders of my old life, the pictures of Mark and me, the little souvenirs we'd collected together. I didn't want to erase him from my life, But I couldn't keep living with constant reminders of what I had broken. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Mark and I started talking again. At first, it was just about bills and shared responsibilities. But with time, the wall between us began to come down. One evening, he came over to talk. We sat on the couch, the same couch where we'd once shared so many happy memories. And for the first time in a long while, we had a real conversation. "I'm not saying things will go back to how they were," he said. "But I'm willing to try. For us." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." Rebuilding our relationship wasn't easy. It took time, patience, and many painful conversations. But through it all, I held on to hope that we could find our way back to each other. Looking back now, I know I made a terrible mistake. I hurt the person I loved most. There's no excuse for that. But I also learned the value of honesty, communication, and never taking the people you love for granted. If there's one thing I could say to anyone reading this, it's this. Don't let a passing temptation destroy what truly matters.